Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is about 4:30, and due to some weather concerns, we ask that you give us a little indulgence for those who have not yet arrived. So thank you for your prompt arrival, but can you grant us an additional 5 minutes for our other guests to arrive? Would that be all right? Wonderful. Thank you so much. We will begin shortly. Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. I am sure that you are pleased that that is the shortest 5 minutes you have ever had to spend. So on behalf of before we begin the formal program, the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies invites you to listen to the safety briefing.
Welcome to the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. You are located at the CLR James Auditorium. There are no planned drills today. In the event of an emergency, you will hear an alarm. Once the alarm is heard, please proceed to the nearest exit, either to the right of the stage or to the back of the auditorium. Once outside, please assemble at the open playing field, where you will receive further directions from the college's emergency response team. Washrooms are located to the right of the stairs as you exit the auditorium, or to the left of this stage. Be reminded that this is a no-smoking facility, and do enjoy your stay at the college.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us now stand for the playing of the national anthem of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. very much. We may be seated. Minister of Labour, the Honourable Stephen McCletchy. Representative of the Minister of Youth and Development, Venezuelan Ambassador, Your Excellency Alvaro Sanchez Cordero. Deputy Head of Mission of Nigeria, Ambassador Joseph Oyi. Chinese Embassy Consular, Linshan Zhao. Country Representative for the IDB, Karina Coburn. Director of the ILO, Dennis Zulu. Director of ECLAC, Diane Quales. President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. Higgins Jean Leon. Sorry, I hope I didn't molest your name. Hygienist, thank you so much for the correction. Hygienist Jean Leon. Chairman of the Board of Governors of the Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperative Studies, Professor Brian Copeland. Director of the Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperative Studies, Dr. Andre Vincent Henry. Editors, Dr. Marlon Anatol, Dr. Mark Curtin, Dr. Ashaki Dor, members of the media, invited guests. Welcome to the launch of the Caribbean Social Justice Agenda. I'm your Master of Ceremonies, Eshuyemi Ogubanke, and we do have a packed program, so I will waste no time in inviting the Chairman of the Board of CCLCS, Professor Brian Copeland, to bid you welcome.
Thank you, thank you. The Honorable Stephen McCletchy, Minister of Labour, and other members of the Cabinet of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I'm not sure if they're here, distinguished heads of diplomatic missions and international organizations accredited to the Republic, keynote reviewer, Dr. Hygienist Jean Leon, President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. Andre Vincent Henry, Director of the Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperative Studies, Dr. Marlon Anatol, Dr. Raymond Mark Curtin, Dr. Shaki Dor, editors of the Social Justice Agenda, contributors to the Social Justice Agenda, fellow members of the Board of Governors of the Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperative Studies, members of staff of the college, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is my honor to welcome one and all to the Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperative Studies and to the college's launch of the book entitled The Caribbean Social Justice Agenda. The book, as you all would know by now, was edited by Dr. Marlon Anatol, Dr. Raymond Mark Curtin, and Dr. Shaki Dor, with contributions from Timothy Alfonso, Andre Vincent Henry, Clement Henry, Juliana Vanessa Davis, Dylan Degoville, Alana Griffith, Hannah Gabrielle Katwaru, Sadiqa Khan, Raul Lucas, Kerryann Roberts, Kazmali, and Kubina Wilson. It's available on Amazon, by the way, in Kindle and hard copy version. This book reflects a new initiative at the college that will see it moving beyond its original moorings, its original teaching mandate, to engage in research and outreach aligned to its core focus on labor and cooperative studies. In that regard, I imagine its researchers would continue to collaborate with staff and other local and regional institutions to advance knowledge in these two areas that no one can doubt are of critical importance to the well-being of society. The Honorable Minister made reference to this initiative at the installation ceremony for the new College Board of Governors just a couple of weeks back, and no doubt will address this again when he speaks not too long from now. When I first learned of this initiative, I reflected on my own career, my early career as a lecturer. I then struggled with questions on the role and relevance of university-level R&D in a developing nation such as ours. Primarily given the extant limitation of human and financial resources, questions arose on the need for us as a nation to forge a fit-for-purpose research agenda and, at the same time, build capacity to make the best use of the new knowledge generated for the benefit of each and every citizen. And this, I came to realize, is what research is all about. Building a store of knowledge, hitherto unmined, that can be leveraged to resolve challenges and fuel development and growth. This assumes the existence of the required infrastructure. Now, if one agrees on the importance of this activity, the question then remains on how to optimize the potential benefits of R&D given the resource constraints of a small developing nation. This, in part, is what motivated my evangelization of economic innovation and entrepreneurship as a national priority. Sorry, I'm supposed to be 6 inches away from this thing. And to collaborate on R&D to drive the development of the steel pan industry. It also places the celebration of the work embodied in the Caribbean social justice agenda into better context. Significantly, the book's editors and contributors treat with research new perspectives that, if utilized, can be applied to improve the state of society and thus contribute to social innovation and entrepreneurship. New ideas, new concepts that bring beneficial results to society. Economic innovation and entrepreneurship is a high priority focus. It's one I've been looking at for all my career. But its purpose is really to serve all of society. So on this basis, I claim that the focus on social innovation and entrepreneurship should be viewed as an even higher priority item. Indeed, one reviewer noted as follows, and I'll quote, "The book was written," they say, I'm just extending it a bit, "by a team of esteemed scholars and activists. The book provides a comprehensive analysis of the various social justice challenges faced by Caribbean societies and proposes," this is the part that really got me, "proposes a series of strategies and recommendations for addressing them." Ideas solidified and recommendations made for action. So in this regard, I applaud the editors and contributors of the Caribbean Social Justice Agenda for their efforts and for their role in taking up the torch in leading the cry for social justice. And by the way, it was our program Dean for General Education, Dr. Sadiqa Khan, who shared this excerpt from a more detailed review written by Fusion AI. I ain't going there, not today, all right? But I think I will end there, and will do so again by congratulating the college for its excellent work. Could not have chosen a better time, Andre, with emancipation on. I mean, that speaks to social justice. And I'd like to wish everyone a great and productive evening. Enjoy your Emancipation Day 2023, but take some time to reflect on why it's there, what went before, and what must come, more important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Copeland, for setting the tone for what is going to come today in terms of what's going to come out of the Caribbean Social Justice Agenda. Our next speaker is certainly no stranger to the college and is here to share remarks and reflections on the agenda. So let us welcome to the stage our Minister of Labor, the Honorable Stephen McCletchy.
A pleasant good day to all. I know on a Saturday evening you all have lots of choices that you could have made, but you chose to be here. So I thank you for that. Distinguished heads of diplomatic missions and international organizations accredited to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Keynote reviewer, Dr. Ignace. Gian Leon, you will forgive me for not being able. I will get it right before the day is done. President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, okay, forgive me for that, but let me start that over. May I also recognize Professor Brian Copeland, Chairman and member of the Board of Governors, Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. Dr. Andre Vincent, Director of Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. Dr. Marlon Anatol, Dr. Raymond Mark Curtin, and Dr. Shiki Dor, editors of the Social Justice Agenda, contributors to the Social Justice Agenda, members of staff of the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I am not only happy to be here today, I'm delighted actually to be with you this afternoon. This is my second opportunity. I have to be present at the launch of a book written by the staff of the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. And I kind of like coming here on these occasions because it means that the college is going in the right direction. It's going in a direction that we have identified within our strategic plan to have the college more involved in contemporary labor issues, to bring it to the fore, and to publish. In fact, I would say that it is imperative that the staff of the college gets more involved in doing seminal work that can be critiqued by all and sundry, so that at the end of the day, within the Caribbean, we could have a body of work and a body of knowledge that we can attest to as being sound and sane. I know I was speaking to Dr. Copeland just before we started, and we identified some inherent issues with research and people wanting to do and write what they feel to do and write, but I think that people like yourselves and the critique of the works will bring it back in line, and somehow we would find a unique balance within that sphere. So, though it's a concern, it's not a fear. I need to start by welcoming our distinguished keynote reviewer to Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Leon. I am aware of your very pressing schedule, and we take it as a signal of honor that you have agreed to spend this afternoon with us. I also want to say how pleased I am to be at the college with a new board of governors headed by one of the country's premier innovators, Professor Brian Copeland. I also want to salute the work of Dr. Marlon Anatol, Dr. Raymond Mark Curtin, and Dr. Dor, and the contributions that this volume, and the contributors to this volume. As the director and staff of the college knows, I have made very clear my expectations that the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies needs to buttress its rich tradition of teaching with strong evidence-based contributions to the social, economic, and political development of the country and the region. Part of my mandate to the college has been for a more informed regional perspective as we seek to build a stronger Caribbean community. Last month, I attended the 111th session of the International Labour Conference. The matters discussed included just transition towards sustainable and inclusive economies, quality apprenticeships, and labor protection, all issues well inside the wheelhouse of this college. At the World of Work Summit, which had as its theme social justice for all, the Director General of the ILO, Mr. Gilbert Humbo, as he encouraged countries to bend the arch of history in favor of social justice, noted that greater social justice gives us cause to rally round, but is much more than that. It is a driving force that can steer us towards a more equitable and sustainable future. As such, it must become our guiding principles for both policies and action. I am very happy, therefore, that the College is actually ahead of the curve with this publication as it seeks to focus with vigor on the appreciation of the implications of the fight for social justice as it applies to the Caribbean region. I believe as we reflect on our experiences with COVID-19 at the pandemic stages 2020 to 2021, we have a sense of how fragile life is and how vulnerable the world, and especially small countries like ours, are in the face of natural and man-made disasters. Addressing these concerns and building resilience in thinking, systems of governance, and institutions in both the public and private sector is a big lift. In the Caribbean, with our small size, we start with a structural disadvantage, which demands from us the application of all the creativity that we claim we have. It also demands for us an intensification of open dialogue built on mutual respect. At the Ministry of Labor, we are committed to the ideal of social justice by promoting fairness and equity in the world of work. We have been taking a comprehensive review of our legal and regulatory framework from labor administration in the country to ensure that, it is adequate to the demands of a rapidly changing operating environment. It seems today that before one thing is done, another begins, and with the pace of so many things happening simultaneously, drafting legislation is becoming a nightmare. You can draft legislation today, and in a month, you have to redraft it because of changes in the global community, changes in technology, changes in the way we work, changes in what is expected of people in the workplace. So it's really challenging, but it's something that we must do. We have before us an active agenda for legislative reform, and we seek to bring strength and build the foundations of our industrial relations and labor administration system. We have several laws under consideration, including the Industrial Relations Act, the Trade Union Act, and more advanced is the Cipriani College of Labor Act, which requires one relook by the Board of Governors before we move and bring it to Parliament. The Industrial Relations, Trade Union Act, and other legislation is currently before cabinet subcommittees where we are looking at aligning it and making sure that it's aligned to other laws. So that within the next year, you will see quite a few pieces of legislation being rolled out. Not to mention, I've promised the Attorney General to camp on his doorstep every week and send him a message every day about my labor agenda. So I'm very hopeful that within the next year, we will see a number of these things happening. So once again, I want to commend the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies team, and I encourage you to stretch yourselves even more. I look forward to the forthcoming volumes because there is a lot of work to be done. Onward and upwards. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Minister, for sharing your pleasure with the Caribbean social justice agenda. It not only provides useful content that's relevant to the region, but it's ahead of its curve, and as Professor Copeland noted, it provides strategies and recommendations for future development. With further comments on the agenda, I invite one of the editors to the podium. Let us welcome Dr. Marlon Anatol.
Good afternoon. All protocols observed. I'm on my best behavior, as my director told me to be. Okay, so my task is really to talk on behalf of the contributors who have been absolutely fantastic. While this is our third publication here, we've gone through a myriad of different stages of conceptualization of what the social agenda actually is or should be. I think we have figured it out, and what we're trying to do is to be at the forefront of the curve in the region, which is lacking robust research, proper conceptualization or understanding of certain issues that affect us all, whether it's Belize, Jamaica, Tobago, I think the other one is probably Suriname. Doesn't matter. The point is this. What the college is trying to do is trying to activate interest in issues that affect all our people. It could be indigenous people or minorities, the vulnerable population, or the mainstream. What this publication has done is dealt with issues that are pretty cool, but also under-researched. So if it is, we look at issues of the LGBTQI plus population, if we look at Venezuelan migrants, if we look at people with pensions and their schemes, if we look at people with different trade interests, if we look at digital transformation, it's all about social justice. You read a lot of rubbish all over the place that speaks to what people perceive these things to be, but ultimately what we're trying here at the college to do is say, listen, these are real issues with real people that have to be investigated, have to be interrogated, have to be discussed. Some of it is uncomfortable for many of us, for many different reasons, and that's cool too. However, as an academic institution, we are trying to go beyond our myopic cultural borders or barriers to try to bring it into academic as well as national, even regional discourse, where we can conversate, as I like to say. But I only have a couple of minutes, so I will go back to my script. This event fundamentally is significant, even though, again, as I mentioned, this is our third launch here, and we are hoping for, I think, if I look at the director, maybe 3 more in the next 2 years. So we're bringing issues to the public, and we have a series of chapters, articles, books, publications, journals that will come out, which will represent data-driven and evidence-based research, not old talk, as Trinidadians love. I am particularly thankful again, and I've said here on 2 occasions before, of the mix that we have with our Caribbean colleagues, academics and practitioners, as well as we try to have a gender bias. Because again, any of you who read anything without pictures, you realize most of the times it's written by certain people who are all male. We're trying to break that mold here at Cipriani. When we look at social justice, we're looking at it in all its different dimensions, stuff that we're discussing now, stuff that we will continue to discuss, and new things that will come up that we don't even know what they are, where they will go, but we're open to that. And we've made a call again to our colleagues, practitioners, academics, policymakers in the region to be involved in what we're doing here. If we don't do it now, it will not be done. This is not 40 years ago, and 40 years from now, we may run into the same problems. On that, I would like to thank my my co-editors, Dr. Rayon Mark Curtin, Dr. Ashaki Doe, who is not here today, for their tireless efforts in what we try to do, and I think we've done it fairly well, and we will get better at it. It's a lot of work, a lot of networking, contacts, international reviewers. It's a lot of work. It's a wonderful publication, if I do say so myself, and I would invite anybody to have a read. And we're advertising that not only because we do it here at Cipriani, but because it has not been done before. We need to be not afraid to chart new ground, to go into places that other people are afraid to go into. We're not afraid of shadows. We are people who've come from adversity, we've come from challenges. And here at Cipriani, we try to rise to those. And as I wrap up, because I'm talking a lot now, part of our agenda, supported and directed and instituted by my director, Dr. Henry, is to ensure that we continue to do what is necessary, not only for Trinidad, not only for the different faculties here, but for regional development. And therefore, if we continue to do and have networks and have conversations with our people, then we will get better at what we do. Agreed, we need more collaboration from individuals, institutions, organizations, well-wishers, or people who are not afraid to do research, like some of our papers here that I've even gone into. I see some of our contributors going into places like Ikakas, etc., going into areas that people don't go into here in Trinidad. People don't go into them areas, but we have, and we've done it well. So, as I end, I look forward to seeing you all here and more people interested in regional and national development as we move forward in our research agenda over the next 2 years. And I really do hope that while I'm not concerned about interest from people who don't care, I'm concerned that we have a space and place, conceptual and real, that allows people to share their views, their ideas. And as we move forward, I'm fairly confident that we will engage more partners, again, with our research agenda, a lot more schools, a lot more institutions, that ultimately we at Cipriani are trying to create a safe space for people to have discussions with issues. Whether people want to talk about it or not, I personally don't care, but I'm a part of an institution. That's what we do. And as a people, as a region, I believe it's the way forward. So thank you very much for coming and for tolerating me for a couple of minutes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marlon Anatol, and I will say yes, you did behave very well for your time at the podium. A little. And I must say, I am even more intrigued about the Caribbean social justice agenda when I hear terms like underreported issues, conversations that might make us uncomfortable, right? Conversations that are driven by data, not just old talk. It gets me a little more excited about the vision of a future where this is a safe space, where people can discuss ideas that will allow us to develop more fully and more richly as we move along. I'm going to take a little break here. Someone has forgotten or lost their keys, their car keys. It's for a Hyundai. If you check and you don't have your keys, it might be at the front desk. And before we get into our keynote address, we do have a musical interlude for you. So here's a time to take a breath, just absorb what you've heard so far, and let us welcome on stage Kern Kaiser, a panist, to give us a little musical interlude. Let's welcome him on stage. Thank you very much, Kern, and can we have another round of applause for our beautiful national instruments? Thank you very much. As its name suggests, the Caribbean Development Bank, I believe, would have a vested interest in the benefits that could accrue from a broader discourse on Caribbean social justice, I presume. So, here to deliver the keynote address is the president of the CDB, Dr. Hyginus. Did I get it right this time? Leon. Welcome to the podium.
Good afternoon. So protocols having been observed, I'm not going to call everyone, but permit me to just recognize Minister McCluskey and the Chairman of the Board of Governors, Professor Copeland, and of course, Director Dr. Henry. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me thank the organizers to invite the bank to make this keynote address. And for me, it's an equal pleasure to be back in Trinidad and Tobago. I was only here maybe a couple of weeks ago, attending the celebrations of the historic signing of the Treaty of Chaguaramas, of course, CARICOM, formation of CARICOM half a century ago. At the heart of that experiment, the CARICOM experiment, I think is the prosperity of our people. People like you, me, our families, our friends. That's what CARICOM, that's what integration is about. Undoubtedly, the 50-year mark is an opportunity, or shall we say was, but is an opportunity to reflect and chart a course for thriving in a sustainable and self-determined future. Yet, if we consider the fragile and precarious context that now characterizes our existence, we may feel it is always one step forward, two steps backward, as a popular calypso in Barbados goes. Let's flash forward to COVID-19, which was a major jolt to the international system. For the Caribbean Development Bank, and more widely the development community, we saw the effects on our fragile social and economic systems, especially in small developing countries. Indeed, for the last 30 years, the Caribbean has had to grapple with the blunt force trauma of a wide range of external shocks, both natural and man-made. COVID-19 compelled all of us to focus even more sharply on finding solutions to sustain our people based on evidence and an intimate knowledge of our environment. The acid test, though, is, do we have appropriate solutions for the next 50 years? Can we design the writing of our future history? And should we be passive observers in how our history unfolds? I think that is the challenge that we need to confront, and therefore the space in which I think this book that we are launching sits. How do we configure, design a future of tomorrow? So to put this in context, I think we have two existential challenges in addressing the issues that confront us. And to be fair, those have been well documented. The first is that small open economies existing in a globalized economic and social space are very susceptible to phenomena over which we have no control. Second, our small size has limited the resources available to us internally, while our debt profile have defined the resources available externally to address our pressing challenges. I'd like to submit, as part of my introductory remarks, that our future as a people, one in which there is, and I'm going to use the phrase, resilient prosperity for all. Resilient prosperity for all. That future will be defined by how we utilize the resource we have in abundance and over which we have total control. I indicated there were two things we had no control over, and I'm saying that we have little resources that equally are limiting what we can do. But there is one resource that we have control over, one resource that exists in abundance, and one resource that I think, if we utilize it appropriately, will be the key to providing us with resilient prosperity for all. And that resource, ladies and gentlemen, is our Caribbean minds. And that mind that we have, the capacity that we have, is what has excelled in creativity, in ingenuity, and one can even argue beyond expectations And if we can harness that, that becomes for me the beginning of the pathway to resilient prosperity. So in that context, I want to welcome the publication of the Caribbean Social Justice Agenda. Why? Because I am convinced that the production of knowledge products that interrogate and lay bare the traumas of our shared history and challenge us to throw off those shackles and define solutions are essential to delivering on that promise of resilient prosperity for our future. And that book, the first of many volumes, is only the beginning of what I think we can achieve. But it's the beginning of what we can achieve because, as I think Dr. Marlon was saying, we need to be able to have candid, open, frank conversations. And that means getting rid of some things that we believe, revisiting things that are probably taboo, and resetting, reimagining what it is we need as a development paradigm if we are to make a change. So let's ask the following question. If we accept that social justice exists, when all people share a common humanity and therefore have a right to equitable treatment, have support for their human rights, and a fair allocation of community resources, if we believe that, wouldn't it therefore be appropriate to declare that there cannot be development of a nation without social justice of its people? That's the question that we need to be able to address, and hence why when I say it's the beginning of a pathway to prosperity for all, if we cannot have social justice the way we have defined it, we can equally say we will not have the development of the people that we are looking to achieve. So we can make the following point. Indeed, social justice promises change, increased access to rights and dignity, and maximization of the potential of a people. In order, therefore, for us to achieve that resilient prosperity that I speak of, and therefore social justice for our people, we must act now, underline now, and we must do so with urgency, agility, and dexterity. At the CDB, we've embraced that as the new direction, the new pathway that we need to undertake as a people. And to be able to get there, we see four key things as defining the challenges that we need to address if we are to secure our future. And these four, in immediate priority, are climate change, connectivity, and connectivity for us is integrated land, air, and marine logistics, digital connectivity, and utility unified fields. And when I say unified fields and grids, I'm talking about one superhighway that can, in principle, carry electricity, carry fiber optic, and maybe other utilities across the entire space in a way that can ensure we have resilience capacities built in where the limits of the resources that individual countries have will not define the capacity for them to be able to expand and grow. So that's sort of one big thing that we see under the broad line of connectivity to add to climate change. The third is implementation capacity. And I think everyone would agree what has prevented the region from growing is our inability to deliver. Implementation capacity deficit has plagued us for the last 50 years, maybe the last 100 years. And until we solve that problem, we are not going to make progress. And we should not allow anyone to tell us, you do not have capacity, Therefore, we cannot give you any more because you're not able to absorb it. That has to be the wrong way of looking at the problem. It has to be, what can you do to improve capacity while you are doing the other things you need to do so that your capacity grows with every project that you put in place? And therefore, that increase in capacity will allow you to receive more and therefore be in a better position to do more than you would with the constraint of capacity. And the last element that we think is super important is what we are calling social cohesion. Social cohesion in its entire sphere captures maybe all of what we have labeled in the social justice space, except that because social justice is about people, and because the whole connectivity and climate change and capacity building are equally about people, then social cohesion adds to all of those and puts people at the center of everything that we need to do. So this is the vision that I am indicating CDB embraces, and the vision that we think is going to take us to the next 50 years, following on the first 50 of CARICOM. And in that same vein, I think the timely publication that we are celebrating or launching today appropriately reflects this Caribbean context of urgency and intersecting issues, with offers underscoring, for example, digital transformation, so one of my connectivity buckets, energy security, another of the climate change buckets, and social protection, and the social cohesion bucket that we have as major pillars on which sustainable trajectories must be secured. And so whether the authors saw this or not, the topics that they focused on, the research topics that they dug deep into to come up with what social justice means matches exactly the pillars that we think are going to be essential for the development of the region going forward. And so hence why I said volume 1 and more volumes to come if we are to move the development needle in any way that we can be proud of, or let me be clearer, our children and grandchildren can be proud of, a region they can make their home of first choice, a region that they all want to say this is home. If we want to be there, then we have no choice. No choice but to embrace a model of social justice. And that's why I want to salute the work that has been done, and why I made the extra special effort to be here just for this afternoon, to come and welcome this particular piece of work. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to do a review of the work, but I don't want to repeat what the authors have said. Neither do I want to prevent you from reading, and so I will talk about it in a slightly different way in terms of where CDB is located in the 3 areas that we talked about: the social protection, secondly on energy security, and then third, I want to touch a little on the private sector, because in the end it is all about moving in that space. So I am, as I said, adding voice to the themes explored in the book, and I want to demonstrate this by showing the alignment with the bank's development agenda, which I have given you a snapshot of. So the theme of social justice, as we say, is fully aligned with CDB's advocacy of a holistic systems approach to development. A holistic systems approach to development. The fact that it's a system tells you immediately that it is not about infrastructure, It is not about schools, but it is about all of those plus the most important part, the people. And that is why this social justice becomes such an important element. But let me, and I'd ask for your indulgence here, allow me to elaborate on what the core of our approach rests on. And I want to make the point, and I was chatting with Professor Copeland a little before we started. There are two principles that, for us, defines the entirety of the development agenda. The first is that you must have a definition of a system, and that definition must be complete and comprehensive. Unfortunately, we have not been complete and comprehensive because we have ignored one key part of that definition, which is the people. And so again, that is why this social justice becomes important. But what it does, though, is because the definition is complete and comprehensive, it embodies the linkages that exist across productive, social, institutional, environmental, and financial elements of all societies. So we need to begin with, what does a society mean? What does it look like? And I would want to make the point that we cannot do development without recognizing and addressing the internal coherence of the whole system. If the system is not internally hanging together, you cannot develop it. And that's the bottom line, a fundamental principle that we believe in. The second principle is that all systems have to evolve over time, and therefore they must have dynamics of motion. And the dynamics of motion of that system must be such that the integrity of the system has to be preserved over time. And that is, in fact, what we do not have. Even if we have definitions of systems, the fact that those systems are moving and stalling, implies that the dynamics of motion cannot sustain the integrity of the definition of the system. And it happens so in the case of the social justice paradigm. If I do not have social justice, then the system that is supposed to operate with justice embedded within it means that the definition cannot be maintained as I go forward. And it will not be maintained because the fact that you do not have justice means you will have an inherent tension. And if you have an inherent tension, then the definition of the system cannot hold. And if the definition of the system cannot hold, systemic integrity cannot continue. And if systemic integrity cannot continue, the evolution of the system, the dynamics of motion will fail. And so our economies will stall. And that is what has been happening and what will happen unless we revisit, rethink what it is that we are doing and embrace things like social justice. So it places this in a very significant space. And so, talking of the definition and the system integrity, what it tells us is that any distortion in the system will eventually compromise the integrity of the definition of the system, and consequently, its dynamics of motion. Therefore, the attainment of any desired trajectories of development must not only ensure coherence within the system at any one point in time, but consistency of systemic integrity over time. So based upon those two definitional principles, definition of the system and the dynamics of motion of the system, and the fact that we need to have the coherence at a point in time and consistent over time, CDB has now adopted 2 key principles to underlie all policies aimed at influencing behaviors for advancing development trajectories. The first is the principle of sustainability, and that's based on strengthening resilience, and so it captures the movement over time, what we call temporality. And the second, to add to sustainability, is inclusivity, which is based on narrowing inequity. I know we say inclusivity means bringing everyone in, but bringing everyone in is the reverse of saying, let us get rid of inequity. And therefore, inclusivity captures the systemic definition that we talked about and integrity of the system. So what exactly can we think of in this inclusivity side? And that again will link to the idea of the sustainable, of the social justice. Inclusivity for us encompasses social inequity, gender, for example. It includes marginalized groups, those ones that are on the periphery, that have not been literally given an opportunity. It includes disadvantaged communities, because that's what makes them not inclusive. They are on the periphery. And therefore, because they are on the periphery, they are not being included. They are not inclusive. And so when we say we make inclusivity and sustainability the key pillars that we use in everything that we do, it means that we are embracing the reduction of inequities wherever they lie in the system. And so the whole line of, if you read the book on social justice, it is about changing, righting, minimizing inequities. And therefore, they have embraced the principle of inclusivity. And hence why it is so closely aligned to what we do at the bank. So, the persistence of inequities, we believe, promotes tensions. As it is easy to observe, the criminality that is growing is a type of tension brought about from an inequity within the system. The tensions that arise in communities is part of being outside of the mainstream of the provision of adequate services. So reducing that inequity reduces tensions that arise in the system. And because tensions in the system means that the integrity of the system cannot hold, then what it therefore suggests is the definition of the system becomes distorted. And therefore, everything we observe, in my mind, everything we observe of economies moving forward in fits and starts and stalling is because of tensions that arise in the system that are the products of tensions because these inequities are allowed to persist. And I equally posit that the only way we go forward in any way, shape, or form and rewrite our history of the next 50 years is if we can reduce, I don't want to say eliminate, reduce those inequities that have created a distortion in the definition of the system. And the definition of the system clearly is the nirvana we want, the society where everything is good, where everyone thinks this is the place we want to be. They will only want to be a first choice home if they are happy, if they are content, they feel safe, they feel secure, they have sustainable livelihoods, they have services, they have access, and they can do this in a way that says that we are secure, we are safe. As long as inequities exist, social justice does not exist. And therefore, you have to embrace that one statement that we've been making. There will not be sustainable development until you have an adequate degree of social justice, until you have reduced social injustice to a certain quantum that get people to a point of comfort. So consequently, addressing those inequities across all parts of the system is essential to attain systemic integrity and the social justice, as I said, that's been discussed in the publication. I have one reservation. The publication does a deep dive at various elements of the system. And so it's clear equally that if we are to implement the policies advocated in this publication, it would therefore be necessary within the spirit of the framework that I've just talked to you about, that we would have to stack and assess the policies for internal coherence. Each piece of the book talks about policies we need to do to solve that particular inequity. But the inequities don't stand on their own. They are part of a system. And the system, for it to have definition and integrity, it must hold coherently at each point in time. And so the part that I say slight reservation, not because the authors didn't do well, but because they were looking at it as slices. What we need to do is to assess those policies for internal coherence at any one point in time and temporal consistency over time, if we are to ensure that specified development outcomes hold. So that would be my only recommendation to the authors as you go into book number 2. Force the authors to address how do the policies hang together. Because if they don't hang together, you won't be able to implement them. You might implement one, you might implement two, but those that you do not implement will automatically create a tension in the system. As long as there is tension, the definition does not hold. And once the definition does not hold, the dynamics of motion will falter. So that's the concept that we need to, I think, embrace as a people, embrace as a region. And if we do that, in my humble opinion, I think we have a chance of changing the history of the next 50 years. So let me, as I promised you, let me talk about the 3 things that CDB is working on that would align fully with what the authors have done in the book on social justice. First, we said social protection. Now, it's clear that disparities in access to resources as well as in capabilities underpin social injustice in societies. Access, capabilities. Within CDB, social justice is operationalized in pursuit of human rights, fairness and equity, ensuring that all citizens live dignified and fulfilling lives and no one is left behind. That's the issue of inequities. No one left behind. The strong synergies between social justice and social protection were underlined and have been underlined in political philosophy over the years. I am sure all of you would have heard of the Rawlsian principles on the value of fairness and the just distribution of social goods as rights, liberties, opportunities, and wealth. For others like Young, the relationship between social protection and redistribution takes a broader dimension resulting from the interplay of existing social structures, political institutions, and power relations. Sen's functional capability explains this relationship by linking access to welfare and the creation of just societies to an individual's ability to engage in economic and political activities. The choice of social protection interventions and their perceived distributional impact depends largely on how individuals see and experience social justice. So whether protection is provided in the form of safety nets to mitigate the impact of economic shocks, or in the form of transformative measures aimed at addressing structural deficits that lead to impoverishment and injustice, that, of course, rests totally upon decision makers' approach to social justice. And therefore, Minister, I pay particular note that you have embraced the idea of social justice in how you are looking at least in your department. Moreover, social justice and social protection share one common denominator, which is rights. Under those frameworks, social protection is an indispensable ingredient in the social contract, in which state parties are legally bound to respect, protect, and fulfill their obligations by ensuring the provision of basic subsistence, essential primary health care, basic shelter or housing, and basic education. Governments, in the vein of social justice, also have the specific obligation to protect vulnerable groups and to use available resources to realize the right to social protection of all members of society. The status of social protection systems in this region is reflective of the incrementalist model of development planning and decision making. Social protection programs are mostly conceived and implemented as reactions to risks and vulnerabilities that emerge and often represent attempts to cope with potentially difficult circumstances. The fact that a significant number of programs in the bank's borrowing member countries' portfolios tend to be supportive and/or ameliorative points to their reactive nature. A small fraction of social protection systems can be categorized as preventive and designed to build resilience to shocks. And that, I think, is where the bulk of our social protection should be focused. The program for advancement through health and education in Jamaica that the bank does, it's a conditional cash transfer program based on the social contract principle and incorporating a psychosocial support element. That is an example of a preventive program. Barbados, Belize, Trinidad and Tobago, and St. Lucia have established similar systems based on the Chilean Puente program model. We've also seen at the time of COVID, where governments had need to not only provide short-term shock responsive social protection programs, but critically to enhance future resilience in their social security and national insurance schemes. As a result of the sheer number of job losses due to the pandemic, within a short space of time, governments have recognized that the lack of unemployment insurance or other suitable mechanisms present a unique structural vulnerability for all of the borrowing member countries, particularly given their undiversified nature and in particular tourism dependency. Unemployment insurance or a similar program is recognized as important to countries' poverty prevention strategy, given that it guarantees persons a minimum amount of income when they are experiencing cyclical unemployment due to downturns in the economy or frictional unemployment when they are deliberately job searching. Furthermore, unemployment insurance and other appropriate risk pooling mechanisms are important also as an important forced saving instrument that can build resilience in social security schemes and provide a buffer in the face of increasing unemployment levels, particularly for workers in the lower quintiles. Given the differential impacts on vulnerable groups resulting from the pandemic, support for the provision of minimum social protection floors in BMCs was imperative, remains imperative, and we argued was socially just. The short-term guarantee of a minimum household income is another important component of this floor and will help to provide basic needs required for the poor, who represent 1/5 of the regional population as of 2016. The bank's medium to longer term investments in social protection will assist the borrowing member countries in strengthening labor market systems, aimed at increasing formal sector participation, and in assisting efforts to increase training and skills enhancement of the citizenry. This approach will further support BMCs to build human capital necessary to optimize their participation in this technologically driven 21st century. So I'm giving you those as examples that you need to view this in its entirety as a comprehensive approach to looking at the idea of social protection and, by extension, minimizing social injustice or promoting greater social justice. In this regard, the bank strategically adopted a multifaceted approach to support BMC's efforts to respond to the needs of the poor and the vulnerable in the short term using existing social protection mechanisms. Over the medium term, however, the bank will support the borrowing member countries to address numerous challenges, including limited interoperability of systems that facilitate social support for different cohorts of beneficiaries. Ineffective targeting leads to errors of inclusion and exclusion, and the repositioning of the social protection system must be developmental in nature by influencing its ethos in being a hand up as opposed to a hand out. And again, that is to do with the design of your social protection schemes as a means of reducing the social inequities that exist. Fundamental to this development approach, intended to break the cycle and culture of intergenerational poverty, is the operationalizing of graduation programs. When built on a solid foundation of social assistance, this can enable poor households to achieve economic resilience through a combination of asset transfers, access to finance for small business operations, technical skills training, dedicated coaching and mentoring, and savings, as well as psychosocial support. Second element I want to talk a little about is the achievement of high-level education outcomes, so in the social cohesion space. And Sadiqa Khan spoke in the book on the nexus between the future of education and social justice. And I wish to spend a few moments elaborating on the importance of education generally and the future of higher education in particular as envisaged by the bank. And you will recall when I started that I said the space where we do not have a comparative disadvantage, the space where we can compete, and where if we leverage it, we can in principle do as well as any other, is if we use our mental talent. The only way you use your mental talent is if you focus the entirety of your effort in a proper learning system. I didn't use the word education system, a proper learning system. And so that is, in my mind, one of the things we need to think about and to lay it squarely in the space that education is a human right, a powerful driver of development, and one of the strongest instruments for reducing poverty, improving health, promoting gender equality, and providing stability in our systems. It has delivered and will deliver large, consistent returns in terms of income, and is the most important factor to ensure equity and inclusion in ways that were unavailable to previous generations. It is therefore not surprising that our region has systematically challenged our historically indigent social and economic circumstances, fueled not as much by leveraging of natural resources, which we don't have a lot of, but by honing of human capital through basic and higher education and training. And I think sitting here at a college institution of learning, we cannot not realize the benefit, the strength of strengthening those institutions, because they are the key, at least in my mind, they are the key to what we can unlock and what we can become, the writing of our own history. The Human Capital Index 2020 shows that education in the Caribbean has seen substantial improvements in terms of access and enrollment rates that enhances our human capital development. Most countries in the region have achieved universal primary education, and efforts have been made to increase access to early childhood development, as well as secondary and tertiary education. At the same time, education and training continues to be one of the flagship sectors in the bank's arsenal to assist borrowing member countries in their quest for social and economic development, particularly for the most vulnerable and the marginalized. 75% of social sector investments approved by CDB are dedicated to educational projects, including capital investments, technical assistance projects, specialized training, research, and knowledge products. And therefore, we walk the walk when we say education, learning is the key to unlocking the future of the region. So despite this progress and the consistent influx of official development assistance to the education sector, the Caribbean still faces several challenges in human capital development and education, and subsequently the fulfillment of social justice. I lost my script for a second. Just bear with me. Okay. So we face, as I was saying, several challenges in human capital development and education, and subsequently the fulfillment of the social justice agenda. While access to education has improved, the quality varies across countries, and there is often a disconnect between the skills acquired through formal education and those required for the job market. Skills required for entrepreneurial endeavors or the development of innovation. Clearly, there is still much work to be done. And again, we believe, especially in promoting inquiry, discovery, and problem-solving skills throughout the education system, and bridging taught knowledge with the design of business applications for enhancing innovation. These are areas that we believe we should be paying a little more attention to. However, for the remainder of the remarks on education, I want to focus on higher education because that's really where we are at the last stage before we enter the labor market. There's an instrumental view on achieving social justice and an intrinsic view. The instrumental view focuses more on higher levels of education, while the intrinsic view is more associated with lower levels of education. And what we do know is higher education plays a crucial role in reducing poverty for individuals, drives long-term economic growth, spurs innovation, and fosters social cohesion for societies. Throughout the history of the Caribbean, higher education has played a significant role in the reduction of poverty, increased generational wealth, decreased reliance on social welfare programs, engaged civil societies, and the growth and development of our countries. But free education up to tertiary level and investment in educational projects on their own will not drive the just transition to green energy that we are equally focused on. So in a world pivoting from fossil fuel-driven energy to alternative methods of powering our societies, it would therefore be remiss of me not to say a few words about energy transition, another plank on which to build social justice. So for us at the bank, energy transition represents both opportunities and risks for the objective of economic and social inclusion. There are immediate opportunities for leveraging the vast indigenous clean and renewable energy resource options to significantly or entirely displace the current use of imported fossil fuels, thus halting the hemorrhaging of scarce budgetary resources and foreign exchange reserves that are used to purchase imported fuel. And that very effort provides a ready financial source which could be diverted to addressing social challenges, allows for the establishment of a more stable economic and social planning environment, reduces the negative impact of oil price volatility, which disproportionately impacts the poorer segments of the population, since energy costs tend to take a large share of disposable income. Given that the public sector is the single largest energy consumer in most BMCs, the transitioning to renewable energy, which displaces the fossil fuel energy bill, represents a ready source of increased fiscal space for governments which are cash-strapped. The private sector, we believe, ought to be willing and ready to provide the investment required for that shift. It is clear, therefore, that opportunities linked to the energy transition abound for Caribbean countries which have been investing in solar energy to heat, water for bathing, laundry, and food preparation long before climate change and renewable energy were buzzwords. And I think you know countries where this used to happen. So taking advantage of these opportunities requires that countries significantly ramp up pace and scale of the energy transition, which currently is a small fraction, I would say somewhere in the region of 12 to 14% of the pace that is required. In response to this situation and to help accelerate that transition, CDB has updated its energy sector policy and strategy and is pursuing what we are calling an accelerated sustainable energy and resilience transition 2030 framework. The acronym is ASSERT, Accelerated Sustainable Energy and Resilience Transition 2030, to encourage BMCs to pursue transformative actions to speed up and scale up renewable energy investments to meet the 2030 targets. And just as I was saying a while ago, as soon as you create the space, not only do you provide better competitiveness, but then you create fiscal room to allow you to redeploy those funds to meet the social justice objectives that we are trying to do. So the proactive role of government through timely and appropriate policies is an imperative, and one that will be ensuring meaningful participation of the poor and vulnerable segments of the population in the process that can engender a just and equitable energy transition. This has to imply equity, affordability, accessibility, and participation in the energy system, and energy transitions, as pointed out in the volume, regardless of race, nationality, income, or geographic location. Again, that is tackling the social inequities by ensuring that that transition is just. I'd also want to reiterate and articulate support for a point made in the publication that not only do we need to continue to strengthen current skills, we need to enhance leadership skills, particularly to harness multidisciplinary and across society collaboration, including educators, like in this room, public agencies, private sector actors, and civil society, because only if we do that can we genuinely talk about tackling social inequities from the bottom up. Else we will miss the boat of what inequity means and what social injustice is about. And that collaboration in planning and policy formulation can facilitate, we believe, the partnering of academics and practitioners to target national goals that integrate climate, energy, and social objectives. So this discourse would be incomplete without acknowledging the role of the private sector in fostering development. We've talked about social programs a lot with the government. We've talked about renewable energy. We've talked about including civil society and people. What's missing is the private sector. And that sector, in our mind, and it's a focus that we've been pushing at the bank, must be seen as a key partner in meeting the region's development needs, and equally to be a long-term patient endeavor. The partnership has to be built on overcoming the mutual distrust that exists between public and private sectors. I don't think this is a secret. Governments see the private sector as people that don't do what they ought to be doing, and the private sector sees governments as the meddlers that do what they should not be doing. And so until we break that cycle of mistrust, then I think we will continue to have problems. And so the ambition of achieving sustainable livelihoods of the citizenry, remember it's resilient prosperity for all, and providing human development for advancing innovation and promoting sustainability, as well as creating safe and secure communities, what we have labeled as minimizing, reducing social injustice, we believe this cannot be achieved solely by tapping traditional public financing sources. They have been inadequate in the past, and I fear they will be inadequate in the future, and a future that we know will have greater needs. So I'm suggesting that a large part of the additional investment and financing that we need to promote this new vision of tomorrow will need to come from the private sector, not as residual financiers, but as partners in development. And the partnership has to be one built on trust, one built on promoting national development goals, and not one that sees public being pitted against the private. This partnership, we think, is critical to creating employment opportunities and contributing to social justice and inclusion through initiatives that support giving back to communities. So let me wrap this up now. The publication that is being launched today builds on and we think celebrates the work of earlier Caribbean scholars who articulated and agitated for social justice in Caribbean societies. Social justice can only be achieved through emphasizing a philosophy that places people at the center of development. For example, the social scarring that George Beckford so skillfully highlighted in his classic work, Persistent Poverty, must certainly remind us of the need to advance Caribbean civilization by steeping that civilization in the principles of equity and social justice, consciously dispelling notions of orthodoxies that threaten the transcendence of poverty and retard the achievement of resilient prosperity. Today, we need a clarion call for all key stakeholders, including academia, to embrace joint responsibility and critique, to educate, articulate, and advocate for increased social justice across the Caribbean, to promote a balanced development agenda, one that will be influenced by the motivation to leave no aspect of development behind, and indeed leave no one behind. That is how we reduce the inequities that continue to promote the social injustice that we want to get rid of. So in that regard, then as I said at the beginning, I fully endorse the publication of the Caribbean Social Justice Agenda. Well done. And I want to urge you not to let this book reside on the shelves of higher education institutions for students of master's and doctoral programs to quote. The book must be disseminated across all platforms that currently exist, including social and legacy media. And I know we all tend to think now social media is everything. But there are a large number of our people, especially those seniors, that I know still listen to radio and watch local television. So not only on social media, let's get it out everywhere. And to help get it out, I want to invite the authors. What about sharing the content of this publication through one of the bank's seminars? And we can highlight the alignment of the work streams that you're doing and the relevance for the region's development agenda that we are equally promoting. And that would be one way of starting to share the message of reducing social injustice. So in closing, social justice is not a subject only for certain people to understand and discuss, but it must be the clarion call for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Leon, for that thought-provoking presentation and that generous offer to share the content on one of the bank's platforms. As I listened, I was quite happy to learn of the dovetailing of the content of Caribbean social justice agenda with the CDB pillars for development. And I do hope in some way that a tangible connection develops between those who internalize the book and the vision of resilient prosperity for all becoming a reality. I'm not sure how that would work, but I think that would be really, really fantastic. I also trust as well that the editors would take on board the advice for the integration of policies in future publications. And with that said, many persons have contributed to bringing the Caribbean social justice agenda and this launch to life. So, to carry the vote of thanks, please welcome to the podium CCLCS Director, Dr. Andre Vincent Henry.
Good evening, everyone. I must start by thanking each of you for spending part of your weekend with us. It has been a pleasure having you in this space. Since I have come to the college, I call it a safe space, and I heard that reflected this afternoon. I'm grateful for all our well-wishers. I am also very happy to have with us members of the Diplomatic Corps and representatives of international organizations who have supported our work. And I'm grateful to our publisher, and I believe we have a good relationship and we will continue building on that. To the contributors of this volume, I thank you that you decided to use CCLCS as the conduit for sharing your views and contribution on these important matters with the wider public. Folks, I now turn to our editors, Dr. Shaki Do, Dr. Raymond Mark Curtin, and Dr. Marlon Anatol. Mark Curtin is my former colleague at the Institute of International Relations at UWI, a distinguished scholar and a most generous human being, committed to coaching and mentoring a new generation of thinkers and contributors to Caribbean development. He has much to say, and Mark, I hope you continue saying it through us here at the college. Dr. Ashaki Do, I predict, has a long and illustrious career before her, and I thank her for her contribution. Forgive me for a personal note, as I express my thanks to my former student, my colleague, my brother, and my friend, Dr. Marlon Anatol. The strides we have made in research and publications here at the college are mainly as a result of the vision and dedication of Marlon. Lonnie, I thank you. Little did I know when he was writing assignments for me, and I took pleasure in taking a red pen to them, that I would rely on you so heavily, and I thank you that you do not hold those indignities against me. I think you don't. Honorable Minister, I believe I can faithfully paraphrase your words to me when you said that for every issue related to the world of work, Cipriani College should have a view and should make that view known. These marching orders have spurred us to think big and to start to punch above our weight class. I thank you, sir, for being here with us this afternoon, but more than that, for your consistent and continuous encouragement, leadership, and I might add, that extends to your permanent secretary and her staff. This is the first public event that we are hosting under the leadership of our new chairman, Professor Brian Copeland. Not revealing confidences, but at our first board meeting last Friday, Professor Copeland weighed in on what our orientation should be in research and publications. Like you, Minister, he was clear that even as we build our capacity as individuals, and even as we teach individuals, that cannot be the end in itself. The chairman was very clear that we have an obligation for national development. For a while I thought I was speaking to a fellow social scientist rather than someone with a doctorate in control systems. Prof, thanks for being here this afternoon, and I look forward to our journey together. Again, I don't want to betray confidences, but when we invited Dr. Leon to deliver our keynote review, I became aware of the pressing travel schedules. Just earlier this week, he was halfway around the world. And when I picked him up from the airport this morning, and he shared with me his travel schedule for the next 6 weeks or so, I got tired. But it's a testament to Gene's, and do not feel that I am taking liberties, because that is his preferred form of address. And it is a testament to his graciousness, generosity, and humility that he fit us in. In fact, he is missing the bank's Kadooment Fest this afternoon. So there are probably people at CDB, when you want to know why you do that. So there are probably people at CDB who are angry with Cipriani College. But I will tell them, blame Brian Copeland. And so he fit us in. Kind sir, thank you for your framing the social justice problematic with a simplicity, with an elegant simplicity. You speak of a complex set of issues in a complicated environment. Professor Copeland, if you listen to him, and this is the strange thing about these two gentlemen, you listen to Brian, you think he's a social scientist. You listen to Gene, you think he's an engineer. Because the elegance with which you speak about these things makes them sexy to listen to. We wish you strength and courage. Leading change is never easy. We wish you strength and courage as you lead the CDB at this very challenging time of Caribbean development that is marked by disruptions and exposures of vulnerabilities that we try to address from our own unique perspective. I thank you for the support and opportunity that you have given to us, including your last very generous offer to make available to us CDB platforms. And I should mention, just yesterday, I signed an agreement with the CDB to engage in a piece of groundbreaking primary research, which will result in the first comprehensive data set on issues related to the Caribbean world of work. Those of us engaged in trying to contribute solutions to some of these pressing issues that we face in the Caribbean have been frustrated by having to make inferences and to speculate uncomfortably in the absence of rigorously collected data specific to the Caribbean. The generosity of the bank and your own vision would help us to close that gap. My friends, it was good being here. Now please join us for some refreshments.
That's okay, and I don't have the strength to turn this, so thank you very much, Dr. Henry, and thank all of you for your time and your interest. I trust that each of you will go grab your copy and start internalizing all of this wonderful information that's available to help effect change for the future development of the Caribbean. Now, I wish all of you safe journey home and just advise you that the refreshment is available in rooms 104 and 105. So as you exit the hall and go back to the reception desk, there will be persons to guide you as to where to find the refreshment. Thank you again for your time.
Tomorrow morning. I don't know if Cipriani. Cipriani, I don't know.